Amazing. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar where you can meet some of our academics. In this session today, we're covering energy and climate change, maritime law, competition law, and tax law. And I'm here with some of my amazing academics, Bernard, Yanis, Nora, and Miriam. So they're each going to tell you a bit about their program, and then this is meant to be quite informal. So if you have any questions for any of our academics, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section and I'll get those answered for you. And if you have general questions about the LLM, you can also put that in the Q&A section and I'll get to those as well. So Yanis, if you want to start.
Yes, thank you, Karen, and welcome to everybody. My name is Yanis Kokoris. I'm a professor of competition law and economics, and I'm also the head of school at the Center for Commercial Law Studies. So very good welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. I will speak very briefly about the competition and LM, and I'm also happy to answer broader questions if anybody would like to ask anything in particular. So our competition law LLM, it's a program that we're focusing on procedural and substantive aspects of competition law. We have a number of modules that we are offering, focusing in different areas of competition law. So we have modules focusing on cartels and anti-competitive agreements. We have modules focusing on mergers. We have modules giving a broad perspective of what competition law is about. And we are also focusing in the last 2 years on digital markets because this is a new and huge developing area in competition enforcement. So our modules cover both the basics of competition law, but also we go into great depth on specific areas which are topical in the way that competition authorities are actually enforcing these laws now. We are lucky because we have not only my academic colleagues teaching in this program who are also have experience in competition authorities previously. So one of my colleagues teaching, Dr. Maria Ioannidou, has spent 3 years in the past as a commissioner in one of the European competition authorities. Myself and another colleague, Eya Daba, are currently judges at the UK Competition Appeal Tribunal. So we bring together, the academic team brings together experience from private practice, enforcers, but also academia. In addition to the core academic team, we are lucky to have a number of external adjunct academic colleagues coming in to teach. So we have practitioners teaching, for example, cartels and collusion. That module is taught by practitioners from Brussels, Spain, and France. And we have practitioners coming in to teach guest lectures in all our modules to be able to give you the actual practitioner perspective of how competition law is being enforced. We focus on a number of modules focus on EU competition law because globally there are 2 main models of competition law that are being followed, EU and US. And we're focusing on EU because this does not cover just the European Union member states, but it covers European Union member states plus another 85 to 90 jurisdictions which have competition law. They follow the EU model. So it's very likely the jurisdiction you come from will be following the EU model. But we also draw parallels and distinctions with the US model of competition enforcement. So where there's a discrepancy between the 2 main competition law enforcement paradigms, we provide input into both of these paradigms. So we give you a holistic approach to how competition law is being enforced globally. And I will finish with that comment, and I'm happy to answer questions. In order to assess how relevant this area of law is, if you look around you, in whichever country you're currently based, you have companies either at national level, which have enough market power to be able to abuse this market power, or they engage in anti-competitive agreements, but also at international level, if we take in, for example, all the big tech companies at this point are under intense scrutiny by competition authorities globally. So Google, Amazon, Meta, Apple, they are under huge scrutiny in the US, in the EU, and many other jurisdictions globally. So competition law is an area which is booming at this point in time and has been doing so for some years and will continue to do so because we have companies and business interests trying to evade it, and then competition authorities come in to try to actually constrain that. So what we deliver in the course is the perspective of, if you work as an in-house counsel, how do you protect your client? If you work in a law firm, how do you advise your client? And if you work in a competition authority, how do you actually address anti-competitive conduct in an objective way? So I'll pause here, and I'm happy to answer questions as they come in. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanis. I will send it over to Bernard.
Thank you very much, Karina, and good morning, afternoon, or evening to all the participants, depending, of course, on where you are. My name is Bernard Schneider. I am the director of the LLM in tax law and the LLM in international tax law. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. And I'm also the director of education. So I'm the academic lead for the LLM and other postgraduate law programs overall. But I'm here, of course, in my capacity, so to speak, as the director of the two tax programs. So we have a very strong tax offering at CCLS, the best in the UK. I think it's safe to say, and I would argue one of the best certainly in the UK and Europe. We have a very distinct comparative and international focus. So you can come to, or you would come to CCLS, you would certainly learn about UK tax law if you wanted to, or actually in all the modules it will come up, which makes sense for a program that's located in the UK, but we also look at international and comparative perspectives on taxation. So we look at particular jurisdictions, we look at them in comparison with other jurisdictions, and we also look at what you might call the international or supranational aspect of taxation, not just organizations like the EU and some others that are active in tax, but also in particular the OECD, and increasingly the UN is a big player in taxation. So also those organizations and their work in taxation. And of course, in the tax context, that means very much, for those of you who are familiar, tax treaties and things like the OECD BEPS project, and now the UN talking about a framework convention in taxation and so on. And this is supported by a very broad range of modules, starting with sort of principles of taxation, international tax law, but then also focusing on particular jurisdictions. The US, the EU, and the UK have their own modules, but then several other major jurisdictions like China and India frequently get discussed in the course of various modules, but also what I would call sort of more subject focused or type focused modules. So we have modules on transfer pricing, on taxation and technology, on taxation in emerging and developing countries, and also on the taxation of individuals, all typically given again with this sort of very comparative approach. So you'll see other programs with a taxation of individuals module or something like that, or individual taxation or personal taxation, but typically not with the kind of broad focus that CCLS is able to offer. We're able to offer it because both of both the mix of academics. We have 4 different jurisdictions represented even among our 4 main tax academics, also because of the guest lecturers we bring in, but also because of the very diverse nature of our student body. In any given year, we have somewhere around 20 or 25 jurisdictions represented just in the tax program. The CCLS, of course, has many more than that. And that's, of course, one of the strengths of CCLS in general, is that you will meet, sit next to, discuss whatever area of the law with people from all over the world. And that's certainly very much one of the strengths of the tax program as well. So it's really quite a unique and strong tax program. We do actually technically have 2, not just technically, we have 2 tax programs, and they are somewhat differentiated. So the in principle, the modules are available. The modules that I've been describing are available on both programs, but the focus of the two LLMs is different. So the tax law LLM, the LLM in tax law, has a more jurisdiction-specific focus, and that is reflected in the so-called compulsory electives that you would be choosing from, whereas the international tax law LLM, as you would imagine from the title, has a more international focus to it. Both very strong programs. You could would be very happy, I think, if you want to do tax in either one of them. Happy to discuss more, to answer any questions, but I think at this point I will stop and let Karina hand over to one of my esteemed colleagues.
Amazing. Thank you, Bernard. Miriam?
Thank you, Karina. Hello, everyone. I'm the acting director for the International Shipping Law Program this year. From next year, it will be called the International Maritime Law Program, and that is for a very specific reason. It's because we're introducing content on public international law insofar as it applies to maritime business. So we will be focusing, we will have a new module focusing specifically on law of the sea and international regulation of shipping. So from next year, it will be called the International Maritime Law Program. There's a large variety of different modules on this program. There are 2 modules that are compulsory. So everybody registered on the program will be taking a module called International Shipping Law, which brings together 3 essential areas in the private law of shipping. So charter party contracts, carriage of goods contracts, and wet shipping law, which is the law governing incidents and collisions at sea. So it's a very exciting 60-credit module, which will be interesting also for people not on the International Maritime Law Program. So it's very relevant also to people on other programs. And it brings a good element of diversity on your CV if you're doing other international business or corporate and commercial law subjects. The second compulsory module is called Marine Insurance Law. And this is because the shipping business is a very, very risky business. So insurance is key. And in fact, the law of insurance developed alongside maritime law. So the origins of insurance are very much tied to maritime ventures. This marine insurance law is, again, a very interesting 30-credit module. It will be taught in the first term, so between October and December. And it will cover all aspects of marine insurance, including protection and indemnity insurance. And that is really interesting because a lot of our alumni have gone on to work in protection and indemnity clubs. There is a large demand for legal expertise in protection and indemnity clubs. So that's the 2 compulsory modules. The first, a 60-credit module taught between October and April. The other 30-credit module taught between October and December. Besides those modules, we also have a number of electives, again, all covering a wide range of subjects. Among them, the module I mentioned earlier on law of the sea and international regulation of shipping. That will be taught in term 2. As well as modules on maritime disputes, modules on transportation by air, so aviation law, and a number of exciting co-curricular activities. So, for example, just today, our current students have gone on a visit to Lloyd's of London, which is the oldest insurance market in the world. So it's over 300 years old, nearly 400 years old now. And they have done visits to many other maritime locations. They also receive guest talks by a number of practitioners throughout the year. Bear in mind that a large proportion of shipping contracts, maritime contracts, are governed by English law, even if they have no other connection at all with this jurisdiction. So if you want to practice in the maritime field, a good grounding in English law, insofar as it relates to shipping, is key. And a lot of maritime law practitioners are based in London. So we have a huge network of contacts who come and talk to our students every year. We also have a mentorship program. I'm sure Karina will tell you more about that in a minute. But again, a lot of our international shipping law students, they take up the mentoring opportunity, and they receive guidance from an established practitioner in the maritime field. I'm very, very happy to take questions.
Great, thanks so much for that, Miriam. And Nora, to finish us off.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, depending on your jurisdiction. I'm conscious I'm the last speaker, so I'll try and be as brief as possible. My name is Nora Galler, and I've been teaching at Queen Mary's since 2002, so quite some time. I'm here in my capacity as Academic Director of the Energy and Climate Change Law Institute. And in fact, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary just this year, so we have had some additional extracurricular events available for students to attend. We started life as the Energy and Natural Resources Law Institute, and although we changed the name to reflect the very significant impact the energy transition is having on the energy sector in particular, but in fact more broadly it will affect all of the sectors you've heard about today, but we still do focus very much on the traditional upstream contractual arrangements in, for example, production sharing agreements, joint operating agreements, because it's very important for students to understand, I suppose, the evolution and the contractual arrangements that were made and continue to be made, because obviously gas has been identified by the International Energy Agency as the transition fuel of choice. So what we've tried to do in the Energy and Climate Change Law Institute is to ensure that the students are aware of where the energy sector came from and its evolution, the historical impact, but actually where it's going. And that energy transition and move away from fossil fuels towards renewable, sustainable and green energy, as I say, is having an impact not just on the energy sector, but more broadly. So we have modules on energy and climate change law, which is actually very popular, not just for energy students, because students more broadly are aware that it will impact all sectors. So the finance, shipping, all of them are having to change their fundamental reliance on fuels. We also do have, I think we're one of the few universities that have modules on nuclear energy, because obviously nuclear is seen as part of the solution for the energy transition, because it deals with the intermittency. So the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. So nuclear is there to provide a clean, efficient, stable base load. And we also are one of the only universities that has what I would like to call it's a power module. So it specifically looks at all of the regulation related to the electricity markets, both in the UK and in the EU. So as I say, we covered the traditional entrenched system, where we're reintroducing this year after COVID, the mining module, which was very popular before COVID. So we're hoping students will enjoy taking up that. And also, as I say, we have renewable energy module, which looks specifically at how those renewable energy projects are funded, get them off the ground, and the impact that they're having in your home jurisdictions. As you can see from our panel here this afternoon, we're all from, the staff are from a range of countries. I'm Irish, and every year we have a wonderful array of diverse students from, I think this year we have in energy about 35 different countries represented. So yes, you learn from us, and I work very closely with James Dallas. Who has over 40 years experience, and he's the executive director. And I was involved, I just figured out the other day, my first energy transaction was 25 years ago. So quite a lot of experience in the faculty. And like Professor Kokoris mentioned at the beginning, because of our London location, we're very lucky to have incredibly experienced staff, as we have visitors like Professor Silke Goldberg, who I used to work with in Herbert Smith, who's a leading expert in her field of energy regulation, and in particular unbundling in the electricity markets. We have Professor Voldemar, who also has over 40 years experience both in China and the UK energy transaction market, as well as nuclear in the US. And Carlos Bellerin, who's has advised the Venezuelan government and has worked for consultancy. So they're kind of part of the core visiting lectures that we have in energy. And I think it's very important for students to have a combination of the practical and academic background. In terms of transferable skills, we have some students who, even if they don't end up working in energy, have come back to us and said that the skills with regard to drafting the contracts, with understanding the movement in the market, the implications of the renewed focus on ESG, climate litigation, climate arbitration, had more broadly were very useful skills in their current careers. And we have had many students who've gone back to work for the government. So in Indonesia, Brazil, Pemex in Mexico, as well as students who work for environmental NGOs and very much keeping tabs on what the energy companies are going. So we've had quite a range of students end up in different locations based on the experience they have had with us in CCLS. And like Miriam mentioned, we also have a very active extracurricular program. So we have things like the annual Clifford Chance lecture that's been sponsored by Clifford Chance for the last 10 years. And we usually have over 150 practitioners and experts come to attend that, as well as ongoing trips. Last year, the students went down offshore Brighton to a renewable a wind farm. So they very much enjoyed that. And we also run a series each term of lectures from experts, whether they're from the government, NGO, energy companies, to give different voices and different perspectives to the students. So on that note, I will hand back to Karina if there's any questions in the chat. Thank you.
Sorry, I've had loads of issues. My mic dropped out, everything stopped working, but I'm on Charlotte's computer now, so everything should be good. But thank you for that, Nora. Hopefully, I'm assuming you guys can hear me. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. I couldn't hear you earlier, so.
Okay, you can hear me now. That's good. Apologies. I've had loads of issues with my laptop. So I've switched over. Thank you for that, Nora. So if you guys have any questions for any of our academics, a few of them have been put into the chat already, which is super helpful, and have been responded to. But sorry about that. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in. Also, if you have general questions about the LLM, what it's like to study with us, you can also put that in there. Somebody asked, either of you can respond to this. Generally speaking, how are courses taught? Are we talking about 1 to 2 hour lectures plus 1 to 1 hour tutorial per week? Who would like to take that one? Yanis?
I can take that one, and I can also respond to Imo, who has asked a few questions above, and others, please do come in to step in. So let me start with the modules. So modules are taught on the base of a 3-hour weekly lecture, either for 5 or over 10 weeks. Some of our modules are 15 credits, which means they run 3 hours a week over 5 weeks. Some are 30 credits, they run 3 hours a week over 10 weeks. We try, and depends on the student responsiveness, to make the lectures or to make the teaching as interactive as possible. So we don't really like coming in a class and just us speaking in a traditional definition of what a lecture is. We try to make it more into a seminar type approach where we interact with our students over a number of issues which we're actually discussing on that particular in that particular week. When it comes to tutorials, depending on the size of the modules, some of the modules will have tutorials. So modules which will be above 35 students, we will also offer tutorials which can vary on number and frequency depending again on the size of the student body. Let me know if there is any follow-up in that question I need to clarify, and let me take some of the questions that Imo, thank you for putting them on the chat. So what makes Queen Mary postgraduate law programs stand out from other universities in the UK and globally? So I will share a few comments, but and then others please do step in. So first, we are offering more than 200 modules every year for our students. We are offering modules which in every area of law we discussed here, but also across our programs, are generic in nature, but also modules which will be very niche. The best example of the type of depth of teaching we offer and the type of breadth of curriculum we have is we have modules which focus on outer space law. You will not find any other university, I will say globally, and if you do, I would love to be corrected, that will offer the same breadth of modules and offerings that we can offer. And this is due to my colleagues that have such a vast expertise on different areas, and they're happy to actually teach in all of these different areas. So if you go through our website, you will see the type of options students have. So you have the opportunity to design the program which will fall within the structure of the program you will choose, but also take the modules you think would best fit your career aspiration. So that's one distinctive element. There's a second distinctive element, which is our close connection and relationship with non-academia. And this can be industry. All of us here, you've heard all of us here talking about the links we have and the benefit our students get from having teaching being delivered or co-delivered with industry practitioners. And this can be in all of the areas you heard here, but that's across all our programs. So we have very close links with the industry, with the profession. That's law firms, that's regulators, that's corporates. And they actually, and that's judiciary as well. And these stakeholders come in to contribute to our classes or deliver classes themselves, deliver whole modules themselves. Again, you will not find many universities in the UK, and I will say broadly, outside the UK, which will have that type of intense relationship. You will find law schools which will have an adjunct coming in to do a guest lecture, but we have modules, and that's from my recollection of modules, and we have many modules will actually have many more guests coming in. We have modules that are being offered by Freshfields, modules that are being offered by Clifford Chance, by Linklaters, modules that are being offered by economic consultancies and by regulators. And these are the ones I am aware of. And I'm only aware of a very small number of modules compared to the vast number we have that my colleague spoke about. So that type of connection with the real practice, you will not easily find elsewhere. Key learning outcomes and career prospects. I think this will differ on the area. I can talk about competition law in particular. So we train you to work either as an in-house lawyer, advising on competition issues, or as a practitioner in a law firm, or as an official of a competition regulatory authority in any country globally. So we train you to be able to do these three types of jobs. How does the university support students securing internships? We have different mechanisms we try to use here. We have the school as a whole and my academic colleagues, we organize a number of different events which will we will invite practitioners to come in to share their expertise. And this is a very good opportunity for our students to interact with potential employers. We also have a mentoring scheme that, Karina, do you want to talk about the mentoring scheme we have in the internship scheme, or shall I say a few words?
I think you should say a few words.
So we have a mentoring scheme, and every year we have more than 200 students who benefit from being allocated a mentor, and the mentor will be somebody from the profession. And this is one-to-one mentoring. So we have a mentoring scheme, a very extensive mentoring scheme, whereby students will actually benefit from this type of mentoring opportunities. We have also an internship scheme, which we're trying to expand, and we have some guaranteed positions for some programs and some areas for internships, but we're also trying to expand that more broadly. And again, I haven't heard of many or any university which can guarantee an internship scheme to every single student. Again, I may stand corrected, and I would love to be corrected, but I haven't heard of any law school which will guarantee an internship opportunity to every single student they have. What we try to do is we have the mentoring scheme, which provides career advice and mentoring from professionals, and we have the internship scheme, which provides actually working opportunities in different countries in the UK, but also abroad. Guest lecture, I think I spoke about guest lecture in industry partnerships. We also have moot courts. We have teams that are very successful in different moot courts in different areas of the LLM programs we have. Banking and finance regulation. Yes, I can say a few things about these two programs. So you will banking and finance, you will find the modules online. So I don't want to talk about the modules as such. Banking and finance, this program focuses on regulatory and non-regulatory aspects of banking and finance. So you have modules which will focus, for example, on banking regulation, security regulation, and you have modules focusing on raising finance through corporate finance or financing development. So you have different modules which cover the regulatory and transactional side in banking and finance. We cover the transactional side on M&A, modules such as M&A, corporate finance, insolvency, but also the regulatory aspect through different areas of regulation of securities and banking activities. Regulation compliance is a broader regulatory program which focuses on regulation compliance in different sectors. So we have regulation compliance in banking, regulation compliance in energy, regulation compliance in IP. So we offer we offer some generic modules on the theory of regulation and compliance, and then we adapt the offering to the different pathways students choose. We have students who have graduated with regulation and compliance and now are compliance officers in investment banking and elsewhere. We have graduates of LLM banking and finance who work in banks, investment banks, or in law firms as practitioners in that area. What are the in-demand lawyers in the UK top 10? That's very difficult to answer because it varies depending on which period of years you look at, because economies go through boom and busts. So when economies do well, you will see lawyers being requested to do more transactional type work, whether this is in maritime or energy or tax. When the economy is not doing so well, lawyers again are actually being very lucky because you have lawyers coming in to advise against potential restructurings in the areas my colleagues covered. But it's very difficult to answer that question because it has a very difficult answer in a way. This will differ depending on the period of time we're looking at. The good thing with lawyers and doctors is they're always needed. Whether you're doing well, you're doing bad, as a company, you need a lawyer to advise you. Imo, I hope I answered your questions, but I know we have other questions, so let's try to answer some of the other questions.
I have one more question for you, Yannis, before we move on. It's a question for the competition law courses. As a student attending the IP LLM, are there course offerings that are more practical for the intersection between the IP and competition courses, guest lectures, or internship opportunities maybe?
So as an IP LLM student, and this applies to any LLM student, you can have some of your credits being taken or being devoted to modules outside your core specialism. When it comes to IP, intersection of IP and competition, we have a module which we run, which is actually, the name is IP and competition. which is run every year. I think it runs in the third semester of the academic year, which discusses the intersection between IP and competition. Outside that module, if your main area of focus is IP and you want to tap into competition, I would say choose the competition law module, the generic one, because that will give you a broad perspective of competition law, and you can identify areas that IP comes into play, because IP is relevant for licensing agreements, is relevant for abuse of dominance if you're abusing your patent. It's less relevant for mergers. And we also have a new program on AI in law, an LLM on AI in law, and there's a module there on AI in competition. It has an IP interplay there as well.
Thank you. I have a question for Nora. So somebody is starting the LLM Comparative and International Dispute Resolution program this semester, and I'm really interested in learning more about the implementation of ESG principles in BITS. Are there any relevant modules in energy and climate change law that cover this topic?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there'll be obviously bilateral investment treaties will be covered in the 2 investment modules that are offered through the specialism for international dispute resolution. And whether or not they specifically look at implementation, because obviously the treaties that have incorporated these new broader obligations, if you will, trying to impose obligations not just on states but also on investors, which is an unusual development in terms of public international law, because treaties are creatures of public international law. They're created by states, so the obligations generally and up until very recently have only applied to and bound the states. So these newer treaties, there hasn't been development in relation to case law as yet as to how, as an example, the new model Dutch bilateral investment treaty will impose those obligations that are mentioned, all the soft law principles, the human rights guidelines on doing business, environmental and social and governance obligations that you mentioned. But it is an interesting development, and it is definitely one that we discuss. As I say, it will be brought up in the investment modules, but also we look at it in the energy and climate change law module, just because it ties in with the evolution that we're seeing in terms of the growth in climate change, climate-related litigation and arbitrations, and in fact, on human rights claims being made at the UN Commission of Human Rights in Geneva. I think it's a really good future-looking topic. Maybe something to consider for doing either a paper for one of the modules where assessment is by paper, I think one of the investment modules is, or possibly a dissertation. But it will definitely be covered in those three modules for sure.
Thank you, Nora. I've got one more question for you that's a bit similar. Somebody asked what energy law courses would be most relevant to students of the public international law stream, please.
Probably, I think that the energy law principles, although it really looks at the contractual provisions and how they're interpreted and applied, is probably more relevant to energy and commercial business students. If I'd started my life as a public international lawyer, so I probably would recommend the energy and climate change law module, because it does cover a range of topics, many of them governed by international treaties, obviously starting with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, but actually looking also at regional initiatives to facilitate the shift away from the entrenched fossil fuel system, so the EU taxonomy, to avoid greenwashing. What actually is a green sustainable project, and in order to be able to comply with that designation, and then to be able to obtain the funding. And it does also address, we look at, as an example, tomorrow I'll be teaching on the development, the quite interesting developments actually in the WTO, so the World Trade Organization. There's been a huge increase in number of cases being taken by states against other states for trying to promote renewable investment, including a case is now pending under the Inflation Reduction Act implemented 2 years ago by Biden in the United States, again, geared, designed to try and push and promote the energy transition, even encouraging purchase of electric vehicles and everything else. But other countries, including China and India, are very concerned about the supports that were introduced in those pieces of legislation. So it covers quite a range of relevant, I think, international legal instruments that would be of interest to a public international law student. Yeah, also, and I teach on the nuclear energy law module. Obviously, a lot of the relevant laws there are actually international treaties, either on liability, early warning and notification that were introduced after the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. So quite, again, primarily focus on international legal regime, as opposed, we do look at, there is a class on the nuclear regime in the UK, but predominantly that would be a public international law focused module.
Thank you very much, Nora. I've got a question for you, Miriam. Stefan says that they're torn between studying full-time or part-time as they're also trying to complete qualifying work experience. Would you say studying an international maritime law LLM is manageable on a part-time basis?
Well, we have had a number of students doing it part-time over the years, and all of those students had practices which they carried on with during their masters. So it's certainly feasible. I would say make sure that you're able to be flexible as to when you can get time out to come to class, because we can't guarantee that lectures will be in, say, evening slots. Most of our lectures this term are from 3 to 6 p.m. So you wouldn't be required to take a whole day off. I mean, it would be quite unusual, but all I'm trying to say is that the timetable is often, well, it's out of our hands. We don't have really much control at all on when lecture slots are scheduled. So I would say yes, absolutely feasible. I would recommend making sure you have the flexibility to attend lectures no matter when they are scheduled. So they can be scheduled anytime between Monday and Friday, and anytime between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Thank you very much, Miriam. So let's see, I've got another question. I think this one's for Yanis. As someone wanting to do the competition law LLM, are there modules that cover the DMCC Act in the UK and the DMA in the EU? If so, what would those be?
Yeah, we have a module. Sorry, DMA will be covered under the competition law module briefly, and then we have a module on digital markets, which will focus mainly on DMA. It will touch on DMCC as well.
Thank you very much, Yanis. And then I've got another question. I see Miriam's typing an answer, but someone else can also chime in with their opinion. So do you have any general advice for students whose motivation to pursue this LLM is to apply to PhD afterwards with the aspiration of going into academia in the future? Who would like to take that? Bernard?
Yeah, so the LLM is certainly a very good route, and in fact, typically a required route to get into academia. Obviously, there's a PhD in the middle between the LLM and the and a career in academia. But certainly, our LLM is very well recognized and appreciated, and there are a lot of academics both here and elsewhere who have gone through the LLM program. I'm not sure exactly what aspects of this you wanted to discuss. I mean, one thing I would say is that if you are, obviously you should choose an LLM program in the area that you would like to ultimately be active in as an academic, number one. And number two, that in that case of a sort of a planned academic career, your dissertation becomes particularly important. So as many of you or all of you probably know, there is a dissertation on the LLM, but in most of the LLM programs, it's an elective dissertation. But in the case of someone who would want, but there are various reasons why you would want to take the dissertation module and write the 30 credit dissertation. One of them certainly is a desire to ultimately go into academia, because I think it's fair to say, I don't want to speak for anyone else on the panel, but I suspect they would agree with me. The first thing, or one of the first things that I would look at a PhD application would be, obviously how well did you do in general, but also very much how did you write a dissertation? How good was it? How strong was it? Because that's an indication, a dissertation is an indication or some indication of your ability to do that kind of sustained research. So I don't know if that quite fully answers the inquiry, the question.
I think so. If not, I'm sure they'll say. Thank you, Bernard. I have two questions for Nora that are together. I think the first one we can answer, or I can answer. They've applied to the general LLM, and they just were wondering if they have flexibility to choose their preferred modules, like the energy one or the maritime one or other ones. And yes, if you are on the general LLM, you have free choice pretty much over all of the modules that we offer. And then their second question is, are there any chances to be an assistant to the academics during the program, for example, work in the Energy and Climate Change Center?
Well, as Professor Vicors mentioned, we do offer each year 2 internships for students to work alongside for a 2-week period, some of the academics in the Energy and Climate Change Law Institute. And sometimes, I mean, there may be a particular project that they might be looking for somebody to help with research, but that's not guaranteed. That is something that it comes and goes. It just depends on what projects are in the pipeline at the time. But it's definitely worth asking the question for sure. And as I say, we do have a kind of a program towards the end of the academic year where we take on 2 interns each year.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So I think, unless another question comes through, we've answered everybody's questions.
Well,
Sorry,
okay, well,
you go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's one from one that I can about. Well, it's an important question, so maybe better if I answer it live, if that's all right. So, Ogawa-san asks, is there an opportunity to talk or get advice about which modules to take? And the answer is very much yes. So one of the big strengths of CCLS, other than some of the things that have already been mentioned, is the range of modules. Really, nobody, certainly in the UK and very few places elsewhere, have the range of both programs and modules that we offer at CCLS. The potential downside is there's, you're almost spoiled for choice, right? There's almost too many choices. But we're well aware of that. It's a good problem, as they say, but we're well aware of that problem. And during induction, so first of all, formally, there's an induction process for everyone who starts at CCLS, and during the induction, there will be many opportunities. We'll give you information. There'll also be many opportunities to ask specific questions, either in the general sessions or just going up to an academic and saying, well, what do you recommend? These are my circumstances. This is what I'd like to do. This is what I've taken before. So I think, if you look at the list, it goes, oh my goodness, how am I going to choose? But I think that will become quite clear as you go through the induction and enrollment process. So I would like to reassure you, and I think it's fair to say that CCLS academics are in general very approachable. So not to worry about, sort of asking people.
Sorry, Karina, I got a question regarding. I'm not sure I understood it. So I asked for clarification. I wonder whether you understood the question better than me.
No, I don't, unfortunately.
Well, all I can say is that the master's is 180 credits. It's a full year course. If you do it part-time, it will take 2 years. And essentially the idea is that we go into quite a lot of depth, and it is taught at an advanced level. I'm not sure what the reference to impact is referring to. I mean, impact on what? But it really depends on what you mean. So I'm cautious about answering that without knowing exactly what it means.
That's okay. I popped in our PG Law -inquiries email. So if anyone doesn't get a chance to get their question answered, email that to us and I'll forward it on to one of our academics or whoever would be best for those. So they can email that. I have a question for Yanis before we wrap up. Someone's going to be a competition law student. To what extent do you incorporate case analysis into your lectures, and how do you encourage students to actively participate in class discussion?
So we are discussing for every topic that we touch on, we bring in the main cases that are relevant for this topic and will inform the enforcement in this area in the future. So we discuss, by default, we discuss all the main cases in competition enforcement, not just the current ones, but also ones that have actually shaped where we are now. So I'll give you an example. If we discuss digital markets, we are discussing the case against Google, Apple, Amazon, Meta, the ones which have been decided in the last few years, but also the ones which are outstanding now before the authorities in court. So we bring in these cases because this is part of the learning that we try to provide to our students. How do we incentivize an interaction? We adopt a very discursive approach in when we actually teach. So we like to ask questions. We like even more when we have answers. And we try to actually invite students to share their own expertise from their own countries, because having a student body of more than 100 different countries, there are more than a number of different ways that an authority can approach the same issue. So and some of your fellow students, maybe yourselves as well, will be practitioners already in your own country. And that's the other thing about our LLM program. We have the majority of our student body will have work experience of a number of years, which means they also bring in their practical expertise into the class, which is what we love, because we also learn from them how things are done in their own country. So we try to incentivize an inside discussion in this way. And because we run, majority of our modules are small modules when it comes to number of students, this number of the small modules allow this type of discussion to take place in a more intense way.
Thank you very much. And I think I've got one more question for Nora, and then we'll wrap it up. And if you guys didn't get your questions answered, please feel free to email us in the PG Law Inquiries email that I put in the chat. So last question is, are there opportunities for LLM students to be part of the journal published by Energy and Climate Change Law Institute?
Yeah, and thank you. So we have an annual Lord Browne dissertation prize. So the top 3 dissertations are awarded a financial prize, and usually then those dissertations will appear maybe in a kind of a slightly edited and shortened version in the journal. But actually, if a student was particularly interested in writing a short article on a topical area, because we try and, let's say, move with the times, and I think we had one on LNG and whatever development is happening on the ground, because the energy sector, well, it's not just the largest sector in the world, but it's also quite fast moving at the moment for various reasons, not just geopolitics. So yeah, we'd be absolutely delighted to accept an article from students for the journal. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nora. So I'll stop this here. So thank you so much to Miriam, to Yanis, to Bernard, to Nora for all of your time, and for everyone that attended and all of your great questions. Stefan said it was very informative. So I hope everyone else felt the same way. And the session will be recorded and it'll be sent out to you guys and also on our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.